Hey, Russell, it's so good to see you. Thank you for joining us on the Everyday Mystic.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. I'm so pumped. I've been watching you in the from concept to execution to the growth of this thing, and I'm so pumped that I get to drop by.
Me too. I know you were one of the early people that I spoke to about, and I don't know if it was this version of the podcast necessarily that we talked about, but I would say it's this version of me that we
That,
talked about.
yes.
And you were so encouraging and supportive and just like on fire
Mm.
about what I could do in the world. And it was a major catalyst for me. So
Mm.
thank you for just showing up at the perfect time.
Well, I think when people have the courage to be who they were created to be in the face of what life throws at them, something activates in them, and it's like the age old adage that your wounds become your wisdom. You're a person who has this relentless, tenacious commitment to not negotiate on who you were created to be. And so it makes my heart really happy to see you grab a microphone and go, hey world, here's what I've found. Because a lot of people talk about things they notice, but not a lot of people do the work to actually understand them and live them and overcome them. So it makes me feel really excited just to get to hang out in your space because you are resilient and you walk the walk and you talk the talk. And I always get better just by being in your space.
Mm.
So I'm selfishly excited for me on today's conversation.
Mutual feelings right there, man. I feel the exact same way. And I think that has a lot to do with you get to a certain point in life where you cut out so much bullshit and extraneous uh, distraction and you
Yeah.
start to focus on and align yourself. And a part of that alignment and focus of self and best self, highest
Mm.
self you were created to be, like the way you put it,
Yeah.
is also the relationships that you then have and the
Mhm.
people that you spend time with and surround yourself with, right? Because we are not here alone in a bubble as much as we are self. And, that is this, we create our own reality. And sometimes you're like, am I just here in a simulation? And then all of this is just made up.
Yeah.
Well, whatever the case, like even when you feel that way, it's like, no, even in the quote unquote simulation or the game of this life, we still
Mm.
are interacting with the energies of others in a
Yeah.
big time way. And so as I think we evolve as people and grow and heal, you just naturally want to be around people who have also put in the work, also are dedicated to growth, also dedicated to healing, and want to show up as their best self and really like live into exactly what you said, that person who that they were created to be and what they're here for.
Mm.
So yeah, yeah to us, yeah to
Yeah.
this space, and to everyone. I want to shout out to our friend Adrian who brought us together,
Mm.
because it wasn't like we just found each other. He
Yeah.
connected us, which I'm not sure why. He connected us. Maybe it was just, yeah, just this,
Mhm.
to have these magical moments of getting to
Yeah.
know one another and spend this time together. So I'm excited to spend this time with you today on the pod. I know you've been going through some major life shifts and transitions. Before
Mhm.
we get there, because
Yeah.
that's the big time stuff that's in the now,
Mm.
I want to go back a little bit
Yeah.
to where you were before those shifts. And because I see, we'll see, what maybe what the catalysts were for that. So where were you before Russell right now? And what drove you to kind of making some of these bold changes?
Yeah. So how far back do we want to go?
Go as far back as you want.
Well, have you ever had a moment in your life that is sort of a key point indicator, a milestone, a moment that changed you, that shifted you? Have you ever had a moment like that? I
Yeah.
think that we all have moments like that, and I think that they are divinely appointed. And these are the moments that help us to understand and discover who we are a little bit more. And when we have the capacity to notice the moment and allow that moment to influence us and shape us in the way that it was meant to, we do our part to step a little bit further into the life we were created to live. And it's interesting, my life has always been a life of trying to use my voice to create motivation and inspiration, and really to just try and be a mirror that reflects back to people the truth of who they are. I believe that if people can just see who they really are outside of their diminishing stories and their limiting beliefs, if they can see who God says they are and hear what God says they are, they will activate and show up to their life infinitely more powerful than they could ever imagine. And that's the hard part, is seeing through the stories we have believed are true about ourselves into even just a little fraction of the truth. And when you can get someone to do that, it's like they're reborn in that moment. And for me, the story of like what's Russell before all the things I'm going in now is it kind of originates way far, way back. When I was a little kid, as most of us, a lot of our programming happens in the early moments of our lives. And for me, I was raised by a single mom who was a beautiful, powerful woman doing the best that she knew how in the moment, while also struggling with addiction and other things like that. And I've never met my dad. So as far as I was concerned, I was the man of the house, and I took it very seriously. So like every night before bedtime, I would like walk through the house with my BB gun, make sure there was no bad guys. I check the closet, check under the beds. Super serious. I'd be like, we are secure, premises is all good. Let's go to bed. And then she would tuck me in and rub my back. And although I was a tough guy, like I'm still going to like get tucked in. I'm not going to like say no to a back rub. But early on in my childhood, I went through foster care system and a whole bunch of things like that where I got pulled away from my family. So when I got reunited with my family, it was a really, really big deal. And I took my family very seriously. You ever notice how that old song, you don't know what you got until it's gone? Mm-hmm. It's like when you're young and you're removed from your family, you realize real quickly how powerful that is. And so I learned to value relationship really, really early. Basically, my mom was raising myself and my younger sister. She was working 4 jobs as a waitress, putting herself through night school full time, interning at a CPA firm, and raising 2 kids and staying sober. It's just, that's a lot. And so I was the man of the house, and my sister and I shared a room, and my mom slept on the floor in the living room. And so my mom would tuck us in, and I would do the whole, like, you can rub my back, tell me a bedtime story. I was all about it. And then about 20 minutes after she tucked me in, I'd always kind of sneak out, and I'd hide behind this chair, and I'd watch her. And I just wanted to make sure she was okay, because I knew there was nobody to tuck her in. And for some reason, that really was heavy on my heart. And so I would just make sure she was good. And I remember, this is one of those defining moments for me, is she would sit at this little table that we had with a pot of coffee that would be brewing and an alarm clock that would go off every 10 minutes or so. And then there would just be books stacked everywhere. And she would just be studying, slapping herself in the face and drinking her coffee so she didn't fall asleep, and studying all night. She probably slept like 2 hours a night. And I would watch this as a little boy, and I would tear up, because I knew that this was for me and there's nothing that I can do about it. And so I did the only thing I could think of. I would find little books, and I'd tear a piece of paper out, and I'd write her a note like, "Dear Mom, you have really cool hair. I'm sorry I didn't listen today. Thanks for playing basketball. You can rub my back if you want. Okay, I have to go by," and I'd fold it in a little airplane, and I'd throw it onto the table. And then I would go and run and hide under my covers so I didn't get in trouble for being out of bed, even though I just left incriminating evidence that I was 100% out of bed. And she would always come in and rub my back, and I'd pretend I was asleep the whole time. And this went on for quite a while. And eventually she graduated the top of her class and was the speaker at the graduation. And I was so proud. And I remember I was sitting in the front row, and she got on stage and she grabbed the microphone and she gave this speech, and she said something to the degree of, "This was hard and I wanted to quit every day, but someone in my life wouldn't let me quit." And then she pulls out a shoebox and opens it and pulls out these little airplanes and starts reading them one at a time into the microphone. And she's like, "This reminded me of what I'm capable of. And this one reminded me of what I'm fighting for. And this one reminded me that I have damn good hair." And it was in that moment that I realized that impossible is not real, that my words have power and that it's possible to inspire people to do things that feel impossible. And it was like I felt my purpose go,
Mm.
hi,
Mhm.
let's do this. And I remember I was a little kid and I was like, I felt so significant. I was like, I helped her do something that felt impossible. Whoa. And so right after that, I had this very spiritual moment and I felt like God had called me to something at like 10 years old. So we had this old shed on our property and I turned it into a church. And I started preaching every Sunday night. I had like 15 people. I would force my neighbors to come. I'd be like, excuse me, would you like to come to my church service, please? Thank you. And they couldn't say no because I was adorable. So um, I was preaching my whole heart out. Like, if you just believe in yourself, like it was so ingrained. And I've never stopped doing that. And so
Mm.
my whole life, I've been trying to figure out how do I use words to remind people who they are and what they're capable of. And, by the time I was 14, I was a traveling speaker. And by the time I was 17, I was in Bible school. I was going to be a pastor. And eventually I graduated from that. I got hired on at this church and was working my way up the ranks. And it's a whole long story that goes from there. But there came a point when I realized that my calling is to create faith, hope, and love and breakthrough in the world. But the mechanism for me isn't the church. I started to feel really suffocated by that. And to me, it felt like a country club of people who look the same, talk the same, act the same, and believe the same, not a catalyst of inclusion and acceptance and transformation and breakthrough. I just had to leave.
Mm.
So I left about 15 or 14, I don't know, years ago. And I've just been in this process of trying to figure out what my medicine looks like in the world.
Mm.
And long story medium, I found a couple things. I started over here heavily spiritual, and then I went over here and like went entrepreneurial, and started a bunch of businesses and had a bunch of success and worked with Fortune 500s and was pulling in millions of dollars. And I felt dead in both camps. And it hasn't been until recently, these last couple of years, that I've come into the middle where I get to, for a living, inspire people to live the life they were created to live, but then I can equip them with the tools and the steps and the systems and the strategies to actually do it through coaching. Coaching is like a hybrid of ministry and entrepreneurialism woven into one. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about what you're doing. Is you have fought hard to find your voice and you have fought hard to keep it. And now you're sharing it in really beautiful ways. It's such a vulnerable thing to do. People don't get how hard it is to create versus consume in this world.
Mm.
And so kind of where I'm at in this season of my life is just being really intentional about me and trying to fill up my cup as much as possible and experience life instead of spending my life working towards making a living. I just want to design my life in such a way where I can live as much of that life as possible. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know if that answers your question. That was a lot.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, beautifully answers my question. Thank you for sharing that story and your origins. And I was going to ask you at some point during our conversation, because recently I've seen these beautiful, impactful videos that you've created where you're preaching. I mean, that is the best way to put it. I mean, you are not preaching to, but preaching the word, and it's very powerful. And in watching them, I wondered, oh, is this new for Russell? He's like, did this just like come up? And now I know, like, no, this ain't new. He's been doing this for, and it sounds like you were born to do it, but also driven to do it because you had that muse with your mom, right? To be able to put this power into something. And I love that she recognized you and saw
Yep.
you in that, because that's a moment, right? Like a different version of Russell, a different, quantum experience of Russell could have been like that she didn't acknowledge the airplanes, or your supportive words, and that never came up, and then you would never have known, maybe, right, that
Mhm.
you are this person, that you are this catalyst for others, for
Mhm.
their own growth and change. So um, amazing to have had that kind of support and recognition from her.
Yeah.
Is your mom still in your life? Are you two close? Where are you at now?
Yeah. So she actually went on to, she graduated. She ended up buying one of the restaurants she was a waitress at. She became an elected official in the town. She's just a big deal. She's probably the most powerful human being I've ever met. She has mastered gratitude. Like, she has the capacity to go through incredibly hard things and have all of it occur to her as like sweet, beautiful adventure. And so, yeah, she's my hero for sure. I learned
Mm.
so much from her. And yeah, it's pretty powerful what gets to be possible when you realize that life is always going to throw rocks, bricks, and cinder blocks and whatever it can at you. And that's a part of the human experience that you signed up for. And when you can dance with all of that as something you're deeply grateful for, that you get to experience all of that, every single part of your life becomes beautiful. And that's the part that I'm continually learning from her. Uh, yeah, she's a gangster. I've read so many books, like hundreds of books in my life, and she's the best master class. You just watch her and you're like, what are you on? So,
The simplicity of that too is so beautiful, isn't it? That just by being in the presence of someone, and modeling after them, or seeing how they live their life and going, okay, that wow,
yeah,
right? Versus taking, all these years and years of courses and study and reading volumes and volumes of books. It can sometimes happen that quickly,
yeah,
or that simply by just, noticing. And um, that's beautiful that you've had such I mean, it doesn't surprise me,
hmm,
because someone who has had, a single parent, been in foster care, shit can turn wrong real quick
yes,
with, a person in your shoes who experienced those same life experiences, but
hmm,
didn't have necessarily
yeah,
the mother that you had,
hmm,
but also your internal resilience and your soul's mission, because you came here with a mission.
yes.
Tell us more about that mission currently. How is that? I know that you're spending time just living so that you can be in that state of gratitude also. But where
Yeah.
is this mission taking you these days?
Yes. Can I answer that in 1 second? Something else just came up for me. I want to share. Is that okay?
Please.
So, we're talking about just gratitude and living life in a more uncommon way. And if you think about it, there's a common and an uncommon pathway into living and leading your life. And if you look at the common results that are resulted from the common path, it's usually not good stuff. It's discontent. It's a lack of joy. It's depression. It's sadness. It's a lack of health. It's not great vibes. And if you look at
Mhm.
the uncommon path, the path that very few find and walk and hold to, the uncommon results of that are hope and peace and joy and gratitude and fulfillment. And we have one life, as far as I know. And even if we get to have more, we get to have this one right now. And it feels incredibly imperative to us to do the work required to walk that uncommon path to get those uncommon results. And it hit me, we were talking about my origins and some of the things I learned from my mom. And when I was a little kid, we were so poor that the fire department would bring us our groceries in little paper bags. Like, we were extraordinarily poor. And I remember we were going grocery shopping and we spent the whole day cutting out coupons. And my mom turned it into a treasure hunting game. And we were going to see, we had like $10. And the goal was to see how far we could make that $10 go. And we spent all day strategizing and planning and doing this whole thing. And we didn't have a car. So it was like several mile walk to every different store. And I remember we walked into the store. My mom huddled around with me and she was like, we get to find all of these things with our treasure box, and they were coupons. And I remember being so out of my mind excited to buy beans and top ramen that it was just an extraordinary experience. Like everything can become beautiful when you apply gratitude. And what I've been reflecting on lately, even this morning, is that in life, all hell will break loose. It is an inevitable requirement of life that pain will be poured into our life, inevitably. And so, if that's the case, and if all hell's going to break loose, it's really helpful to know that, because what oftentimes happens is a lot of people will live their life in the pursuit of happiness and security. And the danger in that is that both of those things are easily taken. Security can be taken from you. Happiness can be taken. It's really hard to be happy when the boat of your life is being broken in half by the waves of circumstance. It's going to happen. All hell is going to break loose. And so if that's the case, and if life is going to bring pain, I hear on so many podcasts, people talk about, oh, I went through this hard time and this thing and this thing. And it's really important to note the hard times that we go through, because they can help shape us. But there's more coming, and it's a part of life. It's part of what we signed up for. And so if that's true, that all hell will break loose and that pain is coming for all of us, and that is inevitable, it's helpful to know this, because it allows us to remember that living our life for security and happiness is what makes that the pain of those storms so loud. Because in living for happiness and in living for security, when those things are removed from us, we experience suffering. But if you replace that with, instead of happiness and with instead of security, if you just replace it with the gratitude to be in the adventure of it all, and the courage to make it all an adventure you have fully lived, every single thing is happening for you, not to you. And I think about this. If I think it was Adrian, he was saying, no, we were made from the same stuff as the stars. Well, if that's true, and we're all just floating around as stardust doing, if I was stardust, I would do a lot of this. This is how I would float in the universe, probably. If I'm just floating around as stardust in the universe, and if some cosmic creator came up to me and said, you have a choice, stay up here and be stardust, or step into human history and experience these swells of joy and happiness and love and elation and the butterflies of falling for someone and the pain of heartbreak and the sting of sickness and the madness of confusion and the peace of knowing that you mattered, which would you choose? And the reality is, I already did, and I'm here, and so did you. And we signed up for this thing called humanity. And we signed up for the pain, and we signed up for the good. And all of it is something that we were made for. We were actually made for the pain. We were designed to go through hell and be bigger than the hell. And so the thing that I was journaling on this morning, is that all hell is going to break loose and pain is going to pour into my life. And even if it takes my life, there is still more life in me than there is death in the storm, because I'm eternal. And I was made for the pain, and I was made for the joy and the love. And all of it is within my soul's design. And when you realize this, you allow it to happen for you instead of to you. It becomes beautiful, and it all activates with just an awareness of gratitude. It's crazy powerful.
It is. I know that word gets thrown around so much, and it's like it becomes an empty concept when it's just this little word, right? And obviously words have meaning, but when you don't understand it and live the word, the energy of that word, and it's not real for you, it's just this like empty thing. Just like, I guess, just like any word can be, but gratitude is such a loaded one, right? And I actually did a post about this a few months back, because my experience with gratitude it's been a journey with just this one concept, right? Just like this one word, one concept of being like, no, fuck you. I'm not going to be grateful for the fact that I was abandoned and then, lived this life or really was not so much about like the loss. It was about what was gained, because as an adoptee, there's a lot baked into that the society around you will put this upon you, that you should be grateful that you were adopted, or you're no longer an orphan. You're no longer an abandoned person. Someone wanted you. You're no longer on the streets or whatever your circumstance was. And it's always with that assumption that what
Mhm.
you have now is better.
Yeah.
Like just automatically better than what
Yeah.
you had before. And that's not always true. That's
Mm,
not always true. And so myself, as well as a lot of adoptees I've talked to, have struggled with this concept because as much as your life may be better on paper or may be better from external markers of things, right? The safety, money, food, whatever.
mhm,
You cannot overlook the loss of
mhm,
being separated from your parent,
mhm,
being ripped apart from that absolutely required and necessary
mhm.
exchange of
Yeah.
energy, DNA, hormones, everything that happens with a biological parent, a biological entity. It is, and I now am a parent and I got to experience all of that and understand like into the depths of my cells of
Mhm.
how real that is, that
Yeah.
there's nothing like just the smell, the
Mhm.
energy, like you feel the vibration in your cells when
Yeah.
you are with this biological entity that I mean I created his body. I mean his soul came in, but creating that and
Mhm,
experiencing that. So um being torn from that at whatever age,
mhm,
infancy, toddlerhood, being
mhm.
separated from that. I don't know when you went into how old were you when you went into foster care?
Um, Very young, probably between you know 6, 7 to 10 or so.
Yeah. I mean, that all of these years when we as humans, we still need our caretakers
Mhm.
much, I mean, more later than any mammal out
Yep.
there,
Mhm.
right? You see other mammals that get born and then they're like,
Oh yeah.
see ya, run away.
Mhm.
They're hunting already. You're like, what the
Yeah.
hell?
Yeah. Totally.
And we're
Totally.
like, oh no, I need you for everything. I need you
Yes.
for everything
Yes.
until we are on our own 2 feet
Yeah.
and living our own lives. And so to be ripped apart from that is so traumatic. And
Mhm.
so yeah, the gratitude concept tied to adoption can be very loaded because
Yeah.
it's like, you know, oh,
Yeah.
is it better? Everyone tells me this is better, but this doesn't feel great.
Mhm.
And it just washes away anything else that may not be going well as like, well, you have to accept that because it's better than what you came from,
Mhm.
society tells you.
Mhm.
So that concept, I've worked with it a lot in my life and have see it now as you've just described it
Mhm.
as an energy,
Yeah.
an
Mhm.
energy that we get to play with and be with and
Yeah.
just like everything in it. So it's not just this word gratitude or concept gratitude, but it's everything. Like
Mhm.
all these conceptual things like love, things that, are hard to sometimes define or to encapsulate in one thing. It's like these big concepts
Mhm.
have and hold their own energy. It's like they're their own entities.
Yeah.
And we get to meet them, join them, learn from them,
Mhm.
mix with them, and fight with them,
Mhm.
and right
Yeah.
and have these different relationships with them over time. I'm
Mhm.
so happy with where my relationship with gratitude's gone. It sounds like you've had such a healthy relationship with
Mhm.
gratitude. But did you have a time in your life when you weren't there, that you felt like maybe more embittered, or your relationship with gratitude or really maybe any of these concepts was
Yeah.
fractured and not good?
So it's so interesting. I have been smart enough to look at the world even as a little kid, and I'd see people with healthy families full of pain and resentment and anger, and people without full of pain and resentment and anger. And I just realized, ah, pain is a common thread in everyone's life, and we all just put different titles and attach different meanings to it. We all get it. And when I was in foster care, one of the ladies, she ended up getting arrested afterwards, but she was just very, uh, I don't know what was going on in her story, but she had a lot of anger in her. And I just remember, when it was dinner time, I would cry a lot because I didn't know where my mom was. No one explained to me that she was going to be fine or why I was no longer with her. And that created an incredibly disjointed energy in me. I just wasn't okay. I wasn't grounded. So I would cry a lot. And she really didn't like that. And so, she would make dinner and she would get everyone, all of her other kids at the table to eat the dinner. And then she would lock me out, make me watch through the window. And then she'd make me sleep she had some pigs and I would sleep with them. And I know that sounds very dramatic, but I loved those pigs. They were so accepting and so fun. And I built a trust with them and we would play games. And I felt like God was sending them to me as caretakers. And I was hungry, but I wasn't out in the rain. I had a roof over my head. And I don't know, even as a little kid, I just found a way. It was almost like a survival mechanism to find what was good over what was painful. And that's been a pretty constant thing in my life. And I attribute a lot of that to my mom and her examples when we got reconnected. The one time where things got really difficult for me was when I started to question my faith. And I started to wonder, is God real, or is this just a mechanism of control that people use to control other people? And as soon as I lost that, so much confusion flooded my life, and bitterness and resentment and nihilism. And it took me down a really dark path. And I'm grateful that I went down that path, because it also allowed me to realize just how beautiful it is to be firmly rooted in my belief that I existed on the imagination of God. And that was such a good idea that he decided he needed to speak me into reality. And here I am. And in doing so, equipped me to overcome every opportunity and obstacle that will come my way. And I just feel really empowered by that. I show up to life very empowered. I realize that there's nothing in front of me that could ever be bigger than what's inside of me. And I can do that because I'm not defined by whatever results or outcomes happen. I'm just grateful that they get to be here. It's like I may not get everything in life that I want, but I do get to fully experience that which I have. And that's been really helpful for me.
Yeah. The richness of that is so amazing, right? Because you could look at the flip side of that, of someone who quote unquote has it all, right? From a societal standpoint, and they end up committing suicide because they're so distraught and broken. Or someone who has it all who's just like a complete asshole, and they're not grateful at all, and they're just like, it is. We've got obviously countless examples we could look at around all of that. And everyone, whether you've got all your material life exactly where you want it, or your life doesn't look like that out there as you wish it to, we all have that ability and that power to live the life we want to here internally. Just like you said, like we get to have that power. We get to have that responsibility, and we get to have that experience if we want it. The stepping into that, though, can be hard for people because it's, society isn't set up to give us this pathway, right? It steers you down a completely opposite kind of pathway, right? And not having models out there. So the more people like you that are out there talking this way, sharing this way, living this way, it's just vital. It's important because we need that in the world so that people can see there are other ways. It doesn't need to, right? It doesn't need to be the common, as you said, or the status quo. So this uncommon life, this way of living where we have and understand that life is happening for us, not to us, that we explore the inner workings of ourselves and our connection to God. for someone who's not stepped into this, who maybe
Yeah.
is living from their, they're completely externalized.
Yes.
Their identity is their job or
Hmm.
their role as, as a parent or in their family. They're completely externalized from the standpoint of all good feelings that they have or bad feelings that they have about themselves come from someone or something
Yes.
outside of themselves, right? So we've all been there at some point,
Hmm.
really externalized because um, life just pulls us out in that way. And it takes a true mastery to kind of come
Yes.
back
Hmm.
in. So, what advice would you give to somebody
Yes.
who is feeling, so externalized and wants to experience this internal reflection in life? Like, what are some of those first steps?
Yeah, absolutely. The very first step is self awareness, realizing that the fruit of your life doesn't match what you want it to be. And if you want to change the fruit, you need to change the roots. You've mentioned society pulls us, society pulls us. That's so true. And the reality is this: if this piece of chalk was a seed, let's pretend that this is a seed. It's not the potential of a seed that determines what it will become. Every seed has the potential to be a beautiful plant or tree or rose bush or whatever it might be. It's not the potential of a seed that determines what it will become. It's the soil it's planted in.
Mm.
You have to plant the seed in the soil that will nurture and nourish it into what it has the blueprint to be all along. And society is not the healthy soil that will nourish and nurture you into who you were created to be. And so, step one is just noticing, acknowledging, and owning that the common soil that everyone plants themselves in is not designed to nourish your highest good and your highest self. So then the question becomes, how do I create the soil in my life that cultivates the life I'm created to live, that I crave to live? And for me, the one of the simplest things you can do is take a look at your values, and change your values, you change your life. You got to change your values first. Don't focus on the external things. You got to focus on the internal things. So if you want to change your life, you got to change your values. So, if you value what people think of you, you got to look at that. You got to change that. If you value your job so much, you got to look at that and you got to change that. And you got to realize that when you value the things that are actually rooted in truth, your life immediately starts to bloom. Like gratitude. That's a value that you can put into your soil. Um, Enoughness, identity, realizing that your value is non-negotiable. You are always worthy, and you got to get to that root and learn to own it and hold it.
Hmm.
I was reading this book that I've read this book many times. It's so good. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And in the
Hmm.
book, he talks about the drummer from the Beatles and the lead guitarist from Megadeth. So the lead guitarist from Megadeth used to be in Metallica. They kicked him out. He started the band Megadeth. They went on. Megadeth is in the top metal bands of all time, but it pales in comparison to the success of Metallica. And he lived his entire life discontent, unfulfilled, full of depression, because in order for him to be enough, he had to sell 100 million more records to just show them. So he was living from a value system where he was externally defined and validated. The drummer from the Beatles, he got kicked out of the Beatles right before they blew up. And he was sad for a while. He started drinking for a while. Then he got his shit together and he realized none of this is serving me. And he changed his value system to value all the time and opportunity and spaciousness that he has to cultivate the greatest family on the planet. And that's what he did.
Hmm.
And he lived his entire life fulfilled and happy and elated because he changed his values. He is never going to be a world-renowned rock star, but he is going to be the greatest dad he's ever known.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's a complex question, but the simplest answer that I can think of is you got to change the soil if you want to grow the seed. And if you're looking for external validations to make you feel enough, you're always going to be betrayed, because the only thing that can make you enough is you deciding that that's true. Nobody's love for you will ever do as much for you as your love for you. And until you activate that, everything that you choose in life will betray you because it was never meant to fulfill you.
Hmm. Yeah. It's so, so true. And the pursuit of, and the pressure that you put on others, really the pressure you
Yes.
even put on, the your profession, or something outside of you, to be that thing for you, to
Yeah.
be love, to be value, worth, enoughness, all those things, really creates a fracturing in our
Mhm.
world, where things become very unstable because we're energetically trying to pull from somewhere that it's not meant to come from there,
Yes.
right? It's,
Yes. And
yeah. So
one
it's
thing
like
I'll
our responsibility, isn't it,
that
to
part.
be in this sovereignty, this like energy sovereignty, and in this
Yep.
place of where we own that shit, and we say, yeah, I'm the best because I say I am. I'm loved because I feel it inside, and I am. And right, the all of the I amness, or the isness. Mm,
Yep. And one other thing that I've done is do the work to clear out your own internal system, but don't let your thoughts become so focused on you that you get lost in that as well. One thing that I do and have done that's really helpful for me is when I notice that I want to experience something, I just go and give that thing.
mm,
So if I'm struggling with feeling my enoughness, I will drop into my heart and I'll look into another person's eyes and I'll see the miracle that they are and I will reflect that back to them and I'll see them activate and I'll realize every single person is asking the same question. Am I enough? Do I belong? Am I worthy? Do you see me? We all just want to know that we are seen and significant. All of us, every single
right.
person. And we're trying to fill it with different things. And when you realize that you're not alone in the questions that you're asking, it helps a lot. You start to feel a lot less alone in your process. And when you make it a practice of living your life to give life, in the process of doing that, you'll get all the life that you could ever need.
Hmm. Yeah.
That part.
The service to others is not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily one way, right?
Yeah.
And not in a selfish way are you doing it, but in a reciprocal
Yeah.
way. It allows that energy to keep flowing and going, to where,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a virtuous cycle,
Mm-hmm.
versus, you can give to others and it be one way, meaning the giving is all for sort of narcissistic pursuits of like feeling, being in control of someone, or overpowering them, or to feel powerful yourself. But when you get into this cycle of like, oh, I'm serving others with this medicine, as you put it earlier, this message, this my experience, even, and
Mm-hmm.
sharing that with someone else so that they might learn from it, so they might grow from it, it gives back to you in a
Yeah.
very natural way. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, like, I guess it's kind of like natural versus coerced, or I mean, I know coercion could be natural too, but it's sort of this like, not, you kind of get into this flow of the natural order of things,
Mm-hmm.
versus like this maybe darker manipulative energy that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
seem as natural for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Could be, we could talk about that, but it does seem like if you look at nature and you experience, the actual natural world around us and that we are part of, there is what you might call evil, if you believe that an animal attacking and killing another animal is evil. But
Yeah.
that's life, right? That is
Sure.
just survival. That
Mm-hmm.
is a natural cycle of things. There doesn't seem to be animals manipulating each other
Mm-hmm.
for their purposes of gaining some sort of egoic mastery or over them, right? So that to me seems unnatural. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but then I get in this loop, and I don't know what you think about this, but I get in this loop around it because I'm like, well, we as humans, we're also part of this natural world.
Mm-hmm.
We are part of and made from, and a product of this natural world too. And
Mm-hmm.
if we are creating these things, isn't it then natural? Isn't it then also natural? And I get in this loop when I look at,
Mm-hmm.
everything that we've created around us, the technology, the the this really came up a lot during the whole early discussions around AI,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like, is this? going to be, is this natural for
Mhm.
us to be, having this kind of technology, or be pursuing this kind of technology? And it's just like, well, if we're the ones creating it and we are human, natural, part of this natural world too, then why is it less natural than what an animal out there in nature is creating? Right. Yeah. What do you think about that?
I've got quite an answer to this, or not an answer, but a reflection. It's going to dip a little into the Bible and a little bit into everything else. It's really interesting. But there's actual cases in nature where, for example, ants can get a certain fungus that drives them insane, and they just start mass murdering other ants in the colony. That's an example of when they're living in an unnatural state. They have the way they were designed, and then they have a twisted version of that design, which causes them to live in a destructive way to themselves and others. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what's interesting is, if you look at humans, we have the way we were designed, the frequency and the energy that we were designed to live in and from and through. And then there's a twisted version of that design where we become destructive to ourselves and to others. And it's actually part of the origin story of humanity. Whether you believe the Bible or not, it's just a really fascinating story of ancient wisdom. Consider it a parable. But in the Bible, God created the heavens and the earth. And before that, I like to think, God was hanging out in heaven with his angels, and they were just having, silent discos and raves and seeing breakdance contests and whatever it is that you do in heaven. I'm 100% doing breakdance contests, so what?
Like whatever you want, right?
Exactly. And Lucifer was an angel. We know him also as AKA the devil. Lucifer was the most beautiful angel, and he was designed to reflect God's glory and presence to the rest of heaven. He was like a prism of love, and he had beautiful jewels woven into his being, and instruments built into him, and everything about him was designed to create light and love and music. You've ever heard a song and it just moves you and gives you goosebumps?
Mm-hmm.
That's what he was built to do. That's just how he moves. He's like, "You're welcome, I'm here." So anyway, that's him. And there's this passage in the Bible where it basically says that, God chose, which is key, God chose to push his love, his light through Lucifer to the rest of heaven. Did God need to do that? No. But God loves to move through other beings, and infect them with love. It's his favorite, according to this concept. And the passage says that Lucifer transacted, which would mean, like, if I worked for you and you owned a bike shop and I sold one of your bikes for $300 and I put 200 in the register and 100 in the pocket for myself. That's what he did with God's worship. He gave most of it to God, but a little of it for himself. He's like, yeah, but what about me? I'm just like God. Look at me. I'm amazing. And in that moment, he created a fracture between him and the energy of pure love, which is God. And so it's like oil and water. He separated himself from it. It's not like God was like offended. It was like, how dare you? I'm the one. Nobody can give you permission to be loved but me. No, it's just like oil and water. You cannot have pure love and narcissism. It's just arrogance, pride. They can't mix. And so what I like to think happened is, the lead up to this is that God decided to create other things, and he created the earth, and he's like, and there it was. And he created the oceans and the fish and all the things, and he created man. And God was fascinated with this, and he was looking at it, and he was like, wow, this is so good. And Lucifer looked at that and started to get jealous and was like, you used to look at me like that. What the heck? And once Lucifer started transacting for himself, God zapped him down to earth. And I like to think of it this way: Lucifer, getting just angry and upset and aggressive, starts pacing back and forth on the earth. He's like, you messed up now, God. What are you going to do now that I'm here? Who's going to worship you? Who's going to reflect your presence and your glory? Who's going to shine your light to others? What are you going to do without me? And I like to think that God was looking down, and he picked a handful of dirt up, and he went, and he created us and said, they will. because we have wind instruments built into our being. We are conduits of the divine. We can channel love and light and hope. We can literally commune with the divine. Everything that Lucifer thought made him special, we are in spades.
Mhm.
And he looked at that, and the rest of the Bible is him trying to pull us out of the alignment of God's love and into the frequency of self-love. So the question is, what is Satan's greatest desire? And according to this line of thinking, Satan's greatest desire is to be worshipped. And what is God's greatest desire? God's greatest desire is to give love. Very different energies. And so if you look at our world, the number one thread you'll find through every magazine, every headline, is self-worship. Look better, be hotter, be sexier, be more powerful, be more liked. Me, 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 me. I think that that's counter to how we were actually designed to live. I think that's a fungus that turns us into something we're not. I think that the core design of what we were designed for as human beings, we were created from love, by love, through love, for love. And you ever notice that when you are truly loving something, you're not really worried about yourself. You just want to give and hold and love and
Mhm.
nurture. And that's the energy that you're coming from. And all of this motivational self-help conversation can be so helpful, but it's dangerous because it plugs you into me, I, self. And it's important to cultivate your root system of your heart and your soul and your life and make them something healthy and whole. But there's a danger because even like the worthiness conversation, when you're like worried about, I'm enough and do they think I'm enough, you're coming from a me and an I space, which is rooted in self-worship. And by the way, if you worship yourself, you're never going to feel enough. The side effect of that is always insecurity, which is why you become susceptible to what you considered evil. But when you remove yourself from that and you're just like, I'm already enough, but look at you. And you shift into that love energy and you just become a conduit of love. You immediately bloom, and so does everything else that you touch. That's a lot of words, but I think the summation of it for me, I look at nature and I look at biblical stories. And the common thread between both is there's a natural design and there's a twisted version of it.
Mm-hmm.
And when the natural design, the ant colony, everybody works together for the common good and no ant has any need. I think the same is true with humans. I think we have a natural design where we were designed to enter the world knowing that we are loved and enough. And unfortunately, no one's going to be able to land that in our soul but us. But when we finally remember that we were created from love, by love, for love, from a frequency that doesn't make mistakes, and when we realize that, the questioning of our own value goes away. And we don't have to expend so much energy trying. We can just be. And then we have so much more capacity to give because we're not always trying to take in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, like self-worship never leads to self-love. It's just interesting to me.
It is. Well, yeah, because you're using that other value system of, right, where you're basing the feelings that you have for yourself on these other external concepts rather than the beingness of love.
Mm-hmm.
And right, you're like, oh, well, I will be loved when this happens, that happens, this person is whatever it is, right? And then you actually get to live into what, we've been talking a lot about words and semantics or the origins of things. It's like the word human being, right? We're not called human doings, right?
Yeah.
We're not called human strivings. We're not called human,
Yeah.
right? It's like we are here to be.
Yeah.
And to be enough, be it, be the thing that we're designed to be. And it sounds so simple, right? When you look at it that way, and to say something like, we're here to love.
Mm.
We are here to love, which I 100% fully believe as well.
Mm.
Sounds like so simple. Like, oh yeah, that's what an answer. Okay. That's how I'm going to live. We're here to love. And yet it can be so hard.
Yeah.
so hard to just live in that,
Yep. Yep.
right? But I believe that is the both the journey of life and also the joy of life, finding getting back to it.
The
It's like,
adventure of it all. Yeah. Yeah. And I find I have a niece, and I find that like the key to all of this is getting out of your head and into your life. And we get these little nudges to help lead us into what that looks like every second of every moment of every day. And those are the desires we have, or the little thoughts we have way back here that want to be expressed, but we stuff them. And I was hanging out with my niece, and we were in the store, and all of a sudden she was just like, I want to hop everywhere. And I was like, are we bunny rabbit shopping? And she was like, yes. And so now we're bunny rabbits. And then she's like, hide and seek. And now we're playing hide and seek. And then after that, she wanted to hold hands and skip. And then we put the groceries away. And then she decided that she wanted to roll around on the grass and pretend that we were alligators. So we did that. And then on the drive, we were howling out the thing. And then later we had a dance party. And it just hit me like, this little girl is tapped in. And she is self-aware to know, like, I'm alive in this present moment and I get to have life. And in this moment, I'm shopping and I'm alive and hide and seek gets to happen. We were the only people in the store playing hide and seek. We were still shopping. I would argue we were doing a way better job than everybody else because we were having a freaking blast. And I think about this, like, if I was on death's doorstep and I was bedridden for years and I could barely move my body and all of a sudden it all went away, I'm dancing in the middle of the vegetable aisle with everything I've got. Because I'm tuning into the reality that in that moment I have the gift of life that isn't guaranteed, but I have it right now. And so I get to fully experience what I have.
yes.
And I'm telling you, like, if you just become more willing to look like a fool, on the other side of that is less ego and more experiencing life. It just is. Because like when you're in ego, you're worried about what other people are thinking about you and what people might think or say or what you might lose because of that. And again, it's rooted in self-worship, self-adulation, and if you just let it go, you get to, something activates and you start to fully live. And like, I've got a group of friends and we've all become really good at this together. It's like a group of 13 dudes. And we have created a culture of just radical self-expression. And it's pretty crazy what happens when we're in public, but none of us are ever surprised. And like, we'll just be sitting there and all of a sudden we'll be like, tag, you're it. And we're like in a bar playing tag or whatever it is. And it's like, everybody is sitting in a bar like this. We're the only people who are laughing so hard, we're going to probably pee our pants. Which is more which is more strange? Just sitting there letting the life that you have been given the miraculous gift of living pass you by? Or playing tag and laughing so hard you're trying so hard not to pee your pants? Like, this is more strange. And so when you just release it and you give yourself, like, a good activity that I give myself is I give myself permission to look foolish at least once a day. And that's really helpful because it keeps my ego at bay and it keeps my heart feeling free to express itself. And here's the thing. Almost every single time I've ever done that, and I've done some weird stuff, I've stood on top of the little checkout thing at a grocery store with the little microphone that they have, and I just decided to sing to people, and I'll just do weird stuff. And it always, like, for 30 seconds, you are just experiencing judgment from everyone. And then one by one it breaks and people start joining you because deep down we all just want to freaking have a blast. And it just takes one person brave enough to step into their life and fully drink it. And everyone else is like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And so just giving yourself permission to be foolish will position you to be a bridge so many other people can cross into living life more fully and more beautifully. And it's so simple. Just give yourself permission.
Yeah. And even if you aren't that first one to do it, you're not the first one to grab the mic, the first one to get on the dance floor. If you at least take the inspiration and jump in and dive in at that point, you're living it.
Yes.
You're doing it. Yes. And, because I know that not everybody is driven by that sense of leadership. Like I was always the person who's like the first on the dance floor. Just it's
Yes.
empty. The band is playing. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm like, someone's going to get out there, whatever, wherever it was. And it felt so good to like get out there and be like, come on, everybody. And then people would like come out and you see everyone like, okay, yeah,
Mhm.
it's safe now.
Yeah.
It's safe enough for me to
Mhm.
go. So you can create that threshold of safety for yourself to just be like, oh, it's safe
Yeah.
because the dance floor is empty. It's
Hmm.
safe because that microphone's right there. It's
Yeah.
safe because I am in my body, right? And I'm going to go just do it.
Mm.
So whatever threshold you create for yourself, but just taking that step and that action, I think is
Mm.
so beautiful and vital to living a
Yeah.
joyful life and just fully living.
Yeah.
And do you have to do any of this shit? No,
No.
you don't. We all get to choose this,
Hmm.
right? But these are everything that you've shared and that I talk about on this podcast in general are like they're ways and they are um possibilities
Yeah.
that if you want to feel different, live different, not feel necessarily the joylessness or anxiety, depression, or dissatisfaction that you may be experiencing now, it's like, okay, these are possibilities for stepping out of that. But
Hmm.
you don't, no one has to, no one's forcing you. And that's also the hard thing is like, oh, you have to be that one then that takes the step because no one's pushing you out on the dance floor. Like, you got to put yourself out there,
Hmm.
but doing in the doing of that, you take that courageous step and then it opens it all up, right?
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. You're so good at like, so I can already tell our energies. I'm very masculine, and you bring a really beautiful feminine. So I'll be like, you just do it, and you look foolish, and you're like, yeah, and you're gonna create safety for yourself from this part, and like you do such a good job. Like I'll say the thing, and then you'll create a beautiful boundary around it that makes it more palatable. It's so good. It's a great reflection for me as well. Just in seeing the way you interpret and respond to things. It's so good.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for that. Yeah, and it's necessary, right? Because um and this is the going back to what we were talking about earlier of we're not here alone. Like if it were just like creating in that example the safety but not the spark necessarily to even have the fire in the first place, then there's nothing, right there. These energies must live together and harmonize with each other, and that's the
Mhm.
fun of it all. More and more people, however, are separating themselves into singularity,
Yeah.
into aloneness um and you see it now with just like everybody walking with their head
Mhm.
down in their phone, and you see it in people's energy fields of
Yeah.
like their energy is not anywhere out here to mix
Mhm.
with and learn from and gain from and
Yeah.
and experience life in its fullness. They're just like sucked into this like this
Yeah.
such a whew. And it is, and I totally agree with you and experience this more and more as maybe I see more and more, but that how strange that is. Like you were saying, it's like it is so strange to be looking at life from that different through that different lens or from a different side of things to be like, oh no, you're the weirdos. not, not that, like not my, freaky set of hippie spiritual, woo
Yeah.
woo friends. Like, no, that's weird. That is strange. That is bizarro world. This,
Yeah.
and they're going to have a different perspective, maybe thinking that we're the bizarro world place.
Totally. I'm
Right.
100% bizarre. That's for sure. I'm doing that immediately. But
Well,
the interesting thing here is that every person has their own internal GPS unit, their own internal compass, designed to keep them on track and on purpose, and it's called joy. And when your joy starts to wane, that is your soul giving you feedback that you're not on the right track. So instead of getting caught in the judgment of that's weird and that's strange, it's actually really useful for me to just look inward and go, where am I at in my joy right now? And if I'm if it's depleting, that's feedback that I need to change my root system. And what I have found is that God or the universe or Santa Claus or whatever it is that you believe, um, is constantly communicating with you how to get back on track of joy and purpose. Um, and I find that it comes in, it usually starts with a feather, and then it's a stick, and then it's a brick, and then it's a bat, right?
Mm.
So like the feather, you'll get this little soft feeling like, oh, I don't know, it'd be nice to do that, but then you don't. And then it comes back and it's a stick, and you're like, ah, man, I feel really kind of blah today, right? And then you ignore it, and then it's the brick. It's like, what is the point of my life? I don't know if I'm gonna do it. And then it's the bat, and it's just like you can't move. And it's like if you ignore the nudges, God loves us enough to keep giving us reminders. It's the feather, it's the stick, it's the brick, it's the bat. But when you finally notice, oh, this is a nudge, and you respond to it, you'll instinctively know what you need to do in that moment. You will get the hit. You'll get the instruction. You just gotta, and that's the thing about listening to podcasts like this is, these are really, really great nourishment to take in, but also you got to just trust that when it comes to it, your soul's going to know what you need to do. And you just get to trust them and take the next step and the next step, because there is no perfect step. It's just having the courage to step it all.
Mm-hmm.
And with each step, the next one will reveal itself to you. I don't know why that's how the divine works, but we never get all the instructions at the start line. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Well, at least for me, I only get enough for my next step.
Yeah. I think that it's because the figuring out what the next step is part of the revealing of what that next step is.
Mm-hmm.
And that journey you take to figure out what the next step is creates the next step. It's like it's creating itself.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than being completely divinely orchestrated, or I guess it's being divinely orchestrated at once and all at the same time, rather than like, oh, it's done and it's a picture that you're stepping into.
Mm-hmm.
And it's infinite possibilities really that we can live into and create and and be, because if you were just given all the answers, like, okay, here you go. Here's the secrets to life, secrets
Mm-hmm.
to your happiness, secrets to, your joy. And we're going to give this to you. Most people wouldn't accept it. I feel like they'd be like, oh, okay, no. And you go out and you end up, right.
Mm-hmm.
You end up going through all the trials, the tribulations, the struggles, the pain, and needing those things in order to then, right. It's like needing the contrast in order to then be able to experience fully
Mm-hmm.
the beauty of that other side.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yeah.
I want to do this again with you, Russell. This was so much fun. Thank you
I would love
for bringing your whole heart, your wisdom, and your vision of what it means to be an alive and really inspired human being who's an example for other humans to see their humanness. It's not going to look like you. It's not, you become Russell, you become more fully yourself. And you're such an amazing example for all of that happening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me, allowing me to speak into your life, your world, your tribe. Reality is all of us are living a life, which is undeniable proof that we were created to live. And the journey of that life is to figure out what that means. What does it look like to live the life we were created to live? And I don't think we ever get that full answer, but I do think that the best pathway to finding out that answer is to be really, really committed to living our life in such a way that gives life to others. And the more you allow yourself to do that, the more life will start to come through you and to you. So if you're still watching this, and if this part makes the cut, if you live your life to get from life, you're always going to feel hollow. You're always going to feel confused. But if you live your life to give life, in the process of giving, you will find the life you're created to live. It's really that simple. So thank you for having the courage to listen, to breathe into yourself, to ask big questions, and to do the work. of filling up your heart and your soul with the nourishment you need to step into this life and live something beautiful. So if you're a listener in this moment right now too, I just want to commend you for taking the time to tend to your own soul and the root system of your own heart. That's rare. And the fact that you're listening to this puts you in the higher percent of the world, the few, the uncommon. And I just want to acknowledge you as well.
Mm. Yes,
Cool.
yes, yes, yes.